This section of the science teaching portfolio is set up to synthesize the progress that I've made this semester towards our fifth learning goal, which was to demonstrate the capacity to create a positive environment that encourages science learning by modeling the attitudes and dispositions of scientific inquiry. Starting off with the evidence from the semester of this progression, I again started off with that scratch lesson plan to show how I created a lesson plan that was relatively unsupportive in the learning environment because it kind of assumes that all students understand what to do. There was not much, if any, teacher modeling clarified on that plan, and there was minimal information as to what sort of environment was being set up there. Continuing off of that, my understanding progressed as I was the discussion leader for the week where we learned about doing science. And this week we talked about using intrinsic motivation, modeling, organization, and meaningful connections in order to set up for a positive learning environment. The intrinsic motivation inspires students to want to learn out of their own personal desires, and this is, when you have those sorts of motivations, that is a very positive learning environment. Using meaningful connections can also be a way to inspire intrinsic motivation. This can be done, for example, by letting students know how the content directly relates to their current or future selves. And again, this sets up for a positive learning environment because the learning seems relevant to the students and they want to learn about it. Finally, in that week, we talked about setting up encouraging environments by teacher modeling, because the modeling encourages success and confident. Students are successful because they've been shown what to do, and they might even begin to internalize what to do, so in turn they are successful when they are participating in activities or completing their work. And students also feel confident because they know that they are participating in the activities in the correct manner because they have been shown. From there, my progression in growth related to this fifth goal expands from discussion to creating a final water cycle lesson plan. This is a lesson plan that provides me the opportunity to use what I have read about creating positive learning environments and put that into use as I create my own lesson plan, so I am given the opportunity to think more about the environments that I am setting up. In this plan, I provide a positive learning environment through teacher planning that allows for multiple exposure to the same content, which allows for a meaningful understanding. In my final water cycle lesson plan, a positive learning environment is also set up by providing those multiple exposures to the same concepts through the 5 E's learning method. Another way that my learning progressed related to this environment after using a lesson plan to make further sense, I read the reading related to using informal resources, which opened my eyes to a whole new way to set up a learning environment that I had never considered before, which was using the environment of informal resources as an inspiration for classroom management or classroom environment. And this is successful because the majority of students enjoy and learn from informal resources. When I think of informal resources, I think of field trips. They learn because their environment that they're surrounded with sets them up to do so. It sets them up to want to learn, to be motivated. It sets them up to feel comfortable learning and exploring their inquiries, and it sets them up to want to further their education and their learning and extend. So teachers can use what they see when they take their students on a field trip, and then they can come back and mimic that environment and to create their own positive learning environment in their own classroom. After reading about the informal resources, I tried to continue my growth in setting up these positive learning environments by creating a CLC lesson plan and then actually teaching that lesson plan. So going out and physically and actively setting up this learning environment. And in this learning environment, I set up the environment considering the same ideas that I read about and discussed throughout the semester in the discussion boards. I set up a learning environment by using intrinsic motivation. Students were intrinsically motivated because they got to choose what colors to create in their color mixing activity. The positive learning environment was set up through modeling. Students were showed exactly what to do, how to do it, and when to do it, so there was no confusion there. That leads into the organization. It was a positive learning environment because the lesson was very well organized. It was taught in a systematic, step-by-step manner that helped to limit student confusion and increase student success. Finally, students were provided that positive learning environment as they were allowed to make meaningful connections with the materials. Students were able to make connections as to how the investigations that they were doing, the processes involved in those investigations for mixing a specific color could be transferred over to investigating anything that they were curious about. So knowing that they were about to learn the tools and the process skills necessary to investigate any future inquiry was enough to get them excited to want to pay attention to the specific things that they were doing. So, reiterating the progression of the fifth class goal, which was to demonstrate the capacity to create a positive environment that encourages science learning by modeling the attitudes and dispositions of scientific inquiry. My learning in this goal progressed as it started off as minimal and, knowing minimal supports for creating that positive environment, reading and discussing the articles with classmates, then trying to test my knowledge by creating my own lesson plan and reflecting further on that, and then finally creating a final lesson plan that I was allowed to teach and actually physically create that learning environment. So I went from, wondering about it to actually doing it.